My name is Sophia Reynolds, and I was 36 years old when I discovered what a simple paper folder could do to an entire family line. My maternal grandfather turned 78 on a Tuesday night in December. He prepared his own dessert, almond cream cake with vanilla layers, his signature recipe from long before my birth. He arranged the dining table for 10 individuals, fabric napkins, his grandmother's ceramic plates, dried lavender stems from his backyard patch. Nobody attended. My parents were vacationing in Vermont. My younger sister sent a text message at 6:30 in the evening. "Thinking of you, Grandpa. The skiing here is fantastic." My father sent absolutely nothing. My stepmother uploaded a photograph of herself in winter goggles to her book club's messaging group with the single word "fortunate." I drove 5 hours from New Haven after completing my overnight shift and found him seated alone in the family room. The wax had melted completely into the frosting. The frozen custard had become liquid. He gazed at me as though he could not determine whether I was truly standing there. I served him a portion. I performed the birthday melody twice. The following night, while I helped him organize the living area, 2 unfamiliar individuals knocked on his front entrance. They handed me a folder, unopened, bulky, marked with my grandfather's personal signature across the seal. What occurred after that afternoon dismantled my family structure completely. Welcome back to Quiet Resolve Stories, where everyday people establish gentle limits that transform everything, and self-respect always has the final word. If narratives about defending someone who cannot defend themselves strike a chord, leave a comment and hit subscribe. That whole evening remains embedded in my memory like a shoe print in soft asphalt. I departed New Haven at 6:30 in the evening, still wearing my courtroom flats, a roadside flower bundle resting on the rear seat. 5 hours on Interstate 91, then the winding roads through Fairmont Valley, where the ancient maple trees curve over the roadway like a cathedral entrance. I entered his crushed stone driveway at 11:45 at night. The outdoor lamp was illuminated. All remaining windows were black. Inside, the dining room table revealed the complete situation. 10 place configurations. A focal decoration of dried lavender he had collected that morning. The dessert sat in the middle, almond cream vanilla cake, 78, written in green gel. The candles had reduced to waxy remains stuck into the topping. A half-gallon of strawberry ice cream had dripped through its paper container onto the table covering. He was seated at the far end of the table in his brown wool vest, hands wrapped around a cup of warm water. "Sophia." He smiled, then his face shifted. "Is this Monday? It's Tuesday night, Grandpa, your birthday celebration." "Ah," he touched the dessert. I believed I was making this for the neighborhood charity auction. I placed the flowers in a drinking glass and arranged a serving for him. We consumed cake using our palms because neither of us felt like searching for clean utensils. I sang "Happy Birthday" 3 separate times because halfway through the first rendition, he requested that I begin from the top. At 1:30 in the morning, I escorted him to his sleeping quarters. He felt extremely light. His arm was as slender as a cardboard cylinder. As I pulled the blanket up to his neck, he grasped my hand. His look became sharp, concentrated, similar to an old radio finally catching a clear frequency. "They assume I'm unaware," he whispered. I remained still for additional words. He had already fallen unconscious. Let me describe my identity within this family. The Reynolds family of Fairmont Valley represents a distinct type of Connecticut privilege. My father, Harrison, supervised territory portfolios for a financial services company until he could play tennis 4 times weekly and relabel it as strategic consulting. My stepmother, Patricia, arranged fundraising dinners and served on the Arts Council Board. My younger sister, Michelle, operated a small real estate investment firm, Michelle Reynolds Holdings, and drove an imported sports vehicle that cost more than my total yearly compensation. And then there was me, the legal clerk. I worked at a 3-attorney firm in New Haven specializing in senior citizens, living wills, estate trusts, conservatorship applications. I earned $54,000 each year and prepared for the state bar test during the midnight hours. My relatives referred to me as the girl who pushes papers. At Christmas dinners, Patricia would angle her head and announce, "Sophia is still occupied with her small legal helper position," as though I were marketing handmade soap at a weekend market. I never responded. I examined the tiny text. But this actual house, belonged to me in every manner that counted and no manner that appeared on any formal record. I took my earliest steps on the kitchen's linoleum flooring. Arthur taught me how to analyze a rental contract on the back porch when I was 21, his spectacles positioned on his nose, a crimson marker held between his teeth. He cosigned my first studio apartment because my parents declined to assist. That night, I rested in the spare bedroom and remained awake, observing the break in the ceiling surface that I had noticed since I was 7 years old. Close to 3:00 in the morning, I rose to retrieve drinking water. On the hallway rack, tucked behind a silver-framed family photograph, I located a contact card. Margaret Sullivan, Sullivan and Parker Real Estate, with a handwritten notation on the backside. Market value $720,000. Rapid sale achievable. I slipped the card back to its spot. My hands were composed, but my digestive system was not. On Tuesday morning, I cleaned the kitchen while Arthur dozed in his resting chair. The leftover dessert went into a sealed storage box. The used candles went into the waste bin. I removed almond cream from the fine plates and stored them in the cupboard, where they would sit until whichever relative eventually came to empty the home after his departure. That concept felt incorrect. I forced it aside. At 11:15 at night, a knock sounded at the front entrance. 2 individuals stood on the veranda. The female appeared around 65, short gray hair, winter overcoat, leather bag, extremely businesslike. The male next to her was younger, approximately 45, transporting a notary stamp in a sealed plastic pouch. "Sophia Reynolds?" the woman asked. "Yes, that's me." "My name is Deborah Marks. This is my colleague, William Hayes. Your grandfather retained my legal services 15 months ago." She extended a manila folder, substantial, closed with a gummed paper seal, my grandfather's name printed on the edge in black marker. "He instructed that we present this to you directly, at the correct moment." "The correct moment for what purpose?" Deborah glanced through the mesh screen toward the resting chair. Her expression softened somewhat. "Visit my office when you're available. This contains my contact information." She pressed the card into my fingers. "Do not discuss this subject with your parents before we speak." They had entered their vehicle and departed before I could formulate another inquiry. I remained on the veranda gripping the folder. It felt heavier than its dimensions suggested, probably 50 sheets of paper. The seal had been signed across the flap in Arthur's handwriting, smooth and intentional, the identical style he employed for holiday cards and birthday money envelopes. My phone vibrated. A message from Patricia, who was at the entrance. "Do not place your signature on anything, Sophia." I turned the phone display downward and carried the folder inside. I seated myself at the dining table, the same table where the birthday dessert had remained untouched the previous evening, and moved my fingertip along the gummed flap. Arthur's signature extended across the seal. I recognized each mark, the prominent A with its unique extension, the unusual curve on the lowercase r. This was not an unstable scribble. This was produced by a gentleman who understood specifically what he was attaching his name to. I tore open the flap. Inside, a set of legal papers I recognized from my employment, a recorded property deed, a trust arrangement, a permanent healthcare power of attorney, notarized signature sheets, a physician's statement on medical office stationery dated 15 months before. Attached to the front, a handwritten memo on Arthur's personalized paper, cream cardstock, black ink, the same smooth handwriting. "Sophia, when they come for the land, open this package. Everything necessary is included. I love you. I apologize. This responsibility must fall to you." I read the message 4 separate times. Each time the expression "when they come for the land" impacted more forcefully. Not if, when, he had predicted this. 15 months earlier, before the memory loss became serious, before he confused me with my mother, before the wandering and the oven left burning, and the morning he became disoriented attempting to drive to the pharmacy 2 streets away, he had understood that someone would pursue his property. He had organized protection. I closed the folder and placed my palm flat against its surface. Through the doorway, I detected the sound of Arthur quietly snoring in his resting chair, a number puzzle sliding off his knee. He had hired an attorney. He had executed legal documents. He had sent me guidelines. That message prevented me from sleeping that night. I remained in the spare bedroom with the folder on the bedside table, watching the ceiling, listening to the old home exhale. On Wednesday afternoon, I telephoned my workplace to report absent for the first time in nearly 4 years. Something inside me insisted that I remain at the house. I discovered it while transporting the recycling containers to the street. A security lockbox. A real estate agent's combination lock fastened to the natural gas pipe behind the lilac bushes, hidden just out of sight from the pedestrian path. I understood its purpose immediately. I had observed identical boxes on every available listing in Fairmont Valley. Someone had been conducting tour of this residence. I went back inside and sorted through Arthur's unopened mail pile. 4 weeks of sealed envelopes on the hallway side table, hidden between a utility invoice and a grocery store advertisement. I discovered a property listing, confidential sale, printed on Sullivan and Parker Real Estate stationery. The same Margaret Sullivan from the contact card behind the photograph frame. 5 bedrooms, 3 full baths, original pine floors, 1-acre parcel. Priced at $720,000. Asterisk THATWS 720,000. That was below the most recent neighborhood comparable. In the kitchen miscellaneous drawer, I located the most disturbing item. A purchase contract, unsigned but entirely completed. Buyer, Harborview Capital Partners, LLC, all-cash offer, closing within 45 days. The space for the seller's signature remained empty, but someone had printed A. Reynolds in capital letters beneath it, like a practice run. The listing representative was Margaret Sullivan. The contact person on the buyer's side was an unfamiliar name. However, the seller's agent identified on the contract was Michelle Reynolds, my younger sister. I dropped onto the kitchen floor and distributed the pages around me like a paper collage. The lockbox, the listing sheet, the purchase contract, Margaret's card, a sticky note in Patricia's handwriting. Closing target, January 30th. That was only 3 weeks away. I retrieved the folder from the bedside table, and this time I opened to the first page of the trust document. I examined each sentence carefully. I placed a telephone call to my stepmother at 9:00 that same night. "Ah, Sophia." Patricia's voice carried that characteristic warmth, the same tone she used with charity volunteers and restaurant managers. Cheerful, controlling. "How is Grandpa doing? We had such a lovely time in Vermont. The snow conditions were simply excellent. There's a real estate lockbox attached to his gas pipe." Silence. 3 beats. 4. "Dear, that matter is being handled. Your father and Michelle have been working with a wonderful agent to determine a sensible transition arrangement for your grandfather. You recognize that he cannot maintain this large property independently anymore. There's a purchase agreement sitting in his kitchen drawer." Sophia, the warmth descended 1 level. "This represents a shared family choice involving your father, your sister, and myself. We have been managing Grandpa's affairs for over a year. There's no requirement for you to worry about the specifics. He has no idea the property is being sold, does he? He understands whatever is appropriate." Patricia paused for a moment. Through the receiver, I detected the sound of a wine glass being set down. "Michelle's business is experiencing financial pressure. The land can pay for a suitable memory care facility for Grandpa while assisting your sister through a difficult period. It's the sensible approach. It belongs to him, Patricia." "Sophia." The level dropped further all the way to the basement. "Icy, absolute. Your grandfather has dementia. He forgets to turn off the oven. He became lost driving to the pharmacy. He is not the appropriate individual to be making decisions regarding a $720,000 piece of real estate." Then she spoke the words. "He won't recall this house by Valentine's Day." The telephone line hummed between us. "Then it's a good thing that I remember," I stated. I ended the call. I picked up the manila folder and Deborah Marks's contact card. I held them side by side beneath the kitchen light. Tomorrow, I would travel to New Haven. Tonight, I had reading to complete. Deborah Marks's workspace occupied the ground floor of a repurposed Victorian house on Elm Street. The reception area featured faded Persian carpets, framed certificates from Boston College Law, and a modest brass plate inscribed Marks and Associates, Elder Law and Estate Administration. I had telephoned at 8:30 that morning. Her assistant transferred me within 90 seconds, which, if you understand anything about legal practices, indicates they had been waiting for my outreach. Ms. Reynolds. Deborah's voice held the same measured calm from the veranda. I'm pleased you made contact. Can you visit today? I drove the 5 hours once more. Deborah received me in a meeting room with a pot of chamomile tea and a tissue box that she positioned exactly midway between us on the table without speaking a word. Your grandfather came to see me 15 months ago, she began. The beginning of September last year, he experienced an episode, became disoriented while driving, ended up 4 towns away, couldn't remember how to return home. A neighbor brought him back. He called me the next morning. He knew you personally. He was familiar with my reputation. His friend Alina had used our services for a trust arrangement. Your grandfather arrived alone. He was sharp, focused. Deborah paused, frightened. Frightened of what? Of precisely what you're witnessing right now. Deborah folded both hands on the table. He told me, my daughter will comply with whatever Patricia says, and Patricia will sell the property the moment I can't prevent it. He wanted to block that outcome before he lost the ability. I set down my teacup. He selected you, Ms. Reynolds, intentionally. He said that you would be the only person who would fight for the land, because you were the only person who understood its meaning. Deborah opened her duplicate copy of the folder. Your grandfather made arrangements for this scenario. Allow me to demonstrate how. Deborah walked me through each document one by one. 15 months earlier, September of the previous year, Arthur had arrived at this office wearing pressed slacks and his silver wristwatch carrying his own folder. The property deed tax assessment records his existing will from 2001. A list of questions he had handwritten on yellow legal paper using the same smooth black ink I had seen on his note. He was methodical, Deborah explained. He shared that he had noticed the memory issues, names first, then appointments, then the route to the pharmacy. He mentioned that his physician had used the phrase early stage. He believed he had perhaps 18 months, maybe 24, before the window would close. The window for what action? For making legally enforceable decisions while he still possessed mental capacity. Deborah turned to a specific page. He requested 2 outcomes: first, to protect the property; second, to designate who would care for him when he could no longer care for himself. And he did not select my father. Deborah looked at me over her reading spectacles. No. He did not. She delivered this without vocal emphasis, but the weight of it settled into my chest like a stone dropping into quiet water. My father represented Arthur's only daughter. She had been raised within that kitchen. Arthur had financed her university education, purchased her first business suit, celebrated at her wedding. And when the moment arrived to entrust someone with the keys to his existence, he had bypassed his daughter and proceeded directly to me, because he knew. He understood that Harrison would follow Patricia's lead. He understood that Patricia would make calculations. He understood that Michelle would take. Your grandfather signed the documents on September 12th of last year, Deborah continued. Complete mental capacity, doctor. Sherman, his neurologist, provided a written assessment that same day, confirming that Arthur understood the nature and consequences of what he was executing. Deborah tapped the physician's letter. This is your foundation. The legal structure was flawless. I identified each instrument from my professional experience. Document 1, a revocable living trust. Arthur had transferred the property, the deed, the ownership, absolutely everything, into a trust titled the Arthur J. Reynolds Revocable Living Trust, dated September 12th of last year. He served as trustee while he maintained capacity. I functioned as the successor trustee. Should he become incapacitated, legal authority over the land would transfer to me, not to my father, not to Michelle, to me. Document 2, a durable power of attorney. Arthur had appointed me as his representative for all financial and medical decisions. The durability clause meant it survived his incapacity. It did not expire when his health declined. It activated. Document 3, the physician's evaluation. Dr. Sherman had assessed Arthur on September 12th and recorded that he demonstrated full testamentary capacity. He comprehended what a trust represented. He comprehended what a power of attorney performed. He comprehended that he was positioning his property beyond the reach of anyone except the granddaughter he trusted. So the land no longer belongs to him, I stated. Technically accurate. The property belongs to the trust. Arthur cannot sell it as a private individual. And under this trust structure, no individual holding a general power of attorney over Arthur possesses authority over assets that have already been transferred into the trust. Only the trustee can approve a sale. And the trustee position is occupied by me. Once Arthur is judged to lack capacity, that is correct. And considering what you've described, he left the oven burning 4 times in the past month, he became lost 3 streets away from home, Deborah nodded. The successor trustee provisions have likely already become active. Then she leaned forward. Ms. Reynolds, there is additional information you should know. If your relatives have had your grandfather sign any recent paperwork, a newer power of attorney, a listing agreement, while he lacked capacity, those documents may not be legally enforceable. She allowed that statement to settle. They may have convinced him to sign something more recent. I drove back to Fairmont Valley that same night. The residents remained silent. The outdoor lamp still glowed as always. Through the front window, I observed Arthur in his resting chair, the television murmuring quietly, his spectacles folded on the armrest. I unlocked the door using the emergency key he had given me at age 17, the one he never gave to my parents. Grandpa. He lifted his gaze briefly. 4 seconds, perhaps 5. His eyes were entirely clear, not the hazy gentleness of typical days, not the comfortable fog, clear like spring water over river stones. You visited Deborah, he said. I stopped in the doorway. You remember Deborah's name? I remember enough. He picked up his spectacles and twisted them between his palms. I remember feeling afraid, and I consulted an attorney, and I described what Patricia would attempt. He paused. Did I handle it correctly? I sat on the couch arm. You handled it perfectly, Grandpa. Good. He positioned the spectacles onto his face, then removed them again, as though he had forgotten why he had reached for them. They've been escorting strangers through the house on Wednesdays when the home aide is present. I hear the doors opening and closing. Unfamiliar people examining my kitchen. I know, your father won't meet my eyes when she visits. She addresses the wall. He pressed his lips together. Michelle brought legal documents. I don't recall what I signed. I took his hand. Whatever you signed doesn't matter. You had already taken care of everything. He tightened his grip on my fingers. His hold was weak but purposeful. I'm not finished yet, Sophia. The statement hung in the kitchen air between us, fragile but defiant. By tomorrow, he might not remember saying those words, but I would. I would keep them for both of us. Michelle appeared on Thursday. She did not ring the bell. She never rang the bell. She simply entered with her car keys chiming and her practiced smile already arranged, the manner in which she approached any room, as though the room should feel honored by her arrival. Hey, Soph. She kissed the side of my head. Her fragrance was sandalwood cologne and imported leather interior. Checking on Grandpa, that's thoughtful. I'm staying for a while. Really? She opened the refrigerator, extracted a sparkling water bottle, and leaned against the counter as though she owned the building. Taking some leave from the legal clerk position. She articulated legal clerk the same way one might say hobby. Michelle, I know about the listing. Her drink paused halfway to her lips, 2 beats, 3. Then the smile adjusted, not vanishing, merely reclassified, from warmth to negotiation. Listen, I realize this seems fast, but consider this. My company is having difficulties. I have a balloon payment arriving in 10 weeks. $780,000. If I cannot pay it, the bank takes everything. Every development project, every contract, 4 years of work eliminated. So you're selling Grandpa's land. I'm helping the family manage an asset that Grandpa cannot manage himself. She set the bottle down. Sophia, the money solves everything. Grandpa gets a quality facility, Mom and Dad stop worrying, I keep my business, everyone benefits. Except Grandpa. Grandpa doesn't know what day it is. He knows that unfamiliar people are walking through his house. Michelle's jaw tightened. She stepped closer. Stop making this difficult. We're family. Family supports family. Is that what you told him when you brought the documents? She stared at me. Then the smile returned, but more rigid now, performative. The sale is basically completed anyway, Sophia. The closing date is scheduled. She left her empty bottle on the counter and walked out without rinsing it. That night, I searched inside the bottom of the hallway cabinet behind a collection of old magazines. I found what they had pressured him to sign, a power of attorney dated October 15th, barely 10 weeks earlier. It identified Harrison Reynolds as Arthur's representative for all financial and property decisions. Stapled to that document was a listing authorization for the property, also dated October 15th, granting Michelle Reynolds the authority to function as seller's agent. I carried both documents to the dining table and laid them beside the original copies from Deborah's folder. The signature differences struck me before I had even finished unfolding the pages. Arthur's trust paperwork from 15 months ago, firm pen pressure, the loops neat and confident, each letter connecting to the next with that distinctive flourish on the capital A. I recognized this handwriting. This was the gentleman who had composed grocery lists in cursive and signed my high school permission slips using a fountain pen. The October power of attorney, trembling lines. The A barely climbed above the baseline. The loops had collapsed. The pen had lifted between letters, creating gaps where flow should have continued. This was not the handwriting of a gentleman who understood what he was signing. This was the handwriting of a gentleman who had been told where to press down. I opened the calendar application on my phone and examined the date. October 15th. My stomach turned over. October 15th fell during the same week Arthur had been taken to the emergency room following a collapse. I had received a message from Patricia. Grandpa had a fall, nothing serious. He's recovering, and had thought nothing further about it. The discharge summary, which I uncovered in the mail pile, stated, patient confused, periodic disorientation. Recommend neurological follow-up. They had convinced him to sign a power of attorney during the same week he had been hospitalized for confusion. I photographed every page. Then I called Deborah. Deborah visited the house on Saturday, not her office, the home itself. She said it was important that we conduct this meeting at Arthur's dining table. I understood her reasoning the moment she arranged everything across the surface. The table was old oak, scarred from 5 decades of Christmas dinners, marked with tea stains that Arthur had always said gave the piece character. Now it held 5 documents in a row, edges aligned like exhibits in a courtroom. Item 1, the recorded trust deed, filed with the Fairmont Valley Town Clerk on September 18th of last year. The property had been formally transferred into the Arthur J. Reynolds Revocable Living Trust 15 months prior. It bore a date stamp, an index number, and an official record. Public information. Item 2, the durable power of attorney appointing me, Sophia Reynolds, as Arthur's agent, executed on that same day. 2 witness signatures, notarized by William Hayes. Item 3, Dr. Sherman's mental capacity evaluation letter, dated September 12th, 3 pages, medical and language specific. Mr. Reynolds exhibits full awareness of the nature and consequences of the legal instruments he is executing. He is oriented to date, location, and identity. He correctly identifies his assets and communicates definite preferences for their disposition. Item 4, the October power of attorney, the one identifying Harrison. Shaky signature. No capacity evaluation, no independent witness. Executed during a week of documented medical disorientation. Item 5, the listing agreement. Michelle's name as seller's agent, Margaret Sullivan as listing agent. A non-public sale priced $65,000 below neighboring comparable homes. Deborah stood across from me, both palms pressed flat on the tabletop. The property has been held within the trust for over a year, she explained. Your grandfather cannot sell it as an individual. The October power of attorney, even assuming it were legitimate, does not provide authority over trust assets, and it is almost certainly not legitimate given the medical records. She directed her gaze at me. This transaction cannot proceed. The land was never theirs to sell. I examined the documents, studying the two signatures positioned side by side, one confident, one trembling, observing the physician's letter that established a boundary between the individual Arthur had been and the individual they had exploited. He won't recall the house by Valentine's Day. Patricia's statement echoed within my skull. But Arthur had remembered. He had remembered before any of them. Deborah and I constructed a strategy, slow, methodical, the type of plan built on documentation rather than anger. Phase 1, we required an updated mental capacity assessment for Arthur, something a court would accept to verify that the October power of attorney had been signed when he lacked the mental ability to understand it. This meant contacting Dr. Sherman's office and arranging a formal neurocognitive evaluation. I placed the call on Wednesday morning. The receptionist placed me on hold for 15 minutes. When she returned, her voice carried a cautious, trained quality I recognized from my own workplace, the tone people use when they are about to deliver unfortunate news wrapped in procedure. I regret to inform you, Ms. Reynolds, but we have received a request to restrict access to Mr. Reynolds's medical records. I gripped the phone more tightly. Restrict access from which individual? I cannot share that information. However, I can advise you that the request arrived approximately 9 weeks ago, and it specifies that medical records and evaluation findings should not be released to anyone except the designated family contact. And who holds the position of designated family contact? Pause. Harrison Reynolds, my father. They had locked me out of his medical file. I remained seated in my automobile in the medical facility parking area and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. 9 weeks prior. That was early November, directly after they had made him sign the power of attorney. They had not merely obtained his signature, they had built a barrier around him. I called Deborah. They've restricted his records. Expected. Deborah did not sound caught off guard. We'll submit a HIPAA authorization using the durable power of attorney. Your power of attorney precedes theirs and designates you as healthcare representative. The clinic is legally required to honor it. I'll send the paperwork today. 48 hours later, I possessed the records. Dr. Sherman consented to conduct an updated assessment. The system works, I reassured myself. Slowly. But it works. Patricia arrived at the house on a Monday evening. She did not bring flowers or prepared food or any of the items you would bring if you were visiting your father-in-law. She brought a glossy brochure, Hilltop Memory Residence. She spread it across the dining table, the same table where Deborah and I had arranged the documents 4 days earlier. It's a wonderful facility, Sophia. Private rooms, landscaped grounds, daily activities. Grandpa does not want to leave his house. Grandpa does not know what he wants. Patricia pressed the brochure flat using both palms. Your father and I have been researching this for months. If we relocate him before Christmas, we can have the property staged and marketed by January 15th. I examined her. She was wearing her church pearls and the cashmere headband she had purchased in Vermont. You're staging the home for the buyer you've already found. Patricia's expression twitched, just a flash, the shortest crack in the plaster. Sophia, I know this is emotional for you. You have always felt connected to this property, but your sister's business is facing genuine difficulty, and this family needs to cooperate. By selling a 78-year-old gentleman's residence out from beneath him? After everything I have contributed to this family, her voice fractured. Genuine tears or theatrical performance? I could not tell, and after 36 years I had stopped trying. The paperwork has already been submitted to the title company, she stated. The closing occurs on January 30th. This is proceeding, Sophia. She left the brochure on the table. I almost walked away that evening. It would have been easier. But if you have ever witnessed someone decide that an elderly individual's worth arrived with an expiration date, you understand exactly why I stayed. If this story is hitting close to home, type I see her in the comments and subscribe so you are here for what happens at the closing table. I had 12 days remaining. The closing was scheduled for January 30th at United Title Group on Market Street, 4 blocks from the Fairmont Valley Town Common. Patricia had scheduled it like she was arranging a dinner reservation. Efficient, final, not available for discussion. I sat in Deborah's conference room the next morning and reviewed the alternatives. Alternative 1. File an urgent petition with the probate court to block the sale. It would work, Deborah felt certain, but it would be public, slow, and expensive. It would give Michelle and Patricia time to regroup. Time to relocate Arthur. Time to hire their own attorney. Time to complicate the situation. Alternative 2. Allow the closing to proceed. Walk in with the documentation. Let the truth accomplish what truth accomplishes when it encounters paperwork that cannot withstand examination. If you appear at the closing with the recorded trust deed and the capacity evidence, Deborah explained, the title officer will do the work for you. They cannot guarantee a title that is under dispute. They will not finalize the transaction. It ends within that room. And if they attempt to push it through regardless, title officers face personal liability. No sensible officer will record a deed they know is defective. Deborah removed her spectacles and placed them on the tabletop. This is the gentler path. No courtroom, no legal filings. Just documents on a table before witnesses. The purchaser, the agent, the title officer, your relatives, they will all be gathered in one space, and the documents will speak for themselves. I reflected on Arthur's memo, when they come for the land. He had not instructed me to go before a judge. He had given me a folder. Let the documents speak, Deborah had said. 12 days. I returned home and began the countdown. Day 1 of 12. I submitted a report to Adult Protective Services. I remained in my automobile outside the Fairmont Valley Municipal Building and dialed the state elder abuse hotline number. The intake specialist was calm, precise, and entirely unsurprised by anything I described. She had encountered this scenario before. Different surnames, identical structure. I presented her with the facts. A 78-year-old gentleman with documented cognitive decline. A power of attorney signed during a week of hospitalization. A non-public property sale priced below neighboring value. A daughter profiting from the arrangement. A stepmother managing the process. An investigator will be assigned, the intake specialist informed me. You will receive a case reference number within 48 hours. Is there any way to speed up the procedure? You mentioned a closing date in 12 days. I will mark this as time-sensitive. I expressed my gratitude and ended the call. Then I remained in the car for a full 2 minutes observing 2 senior women walk into the public library across the street arm in arm, laughing about something. Ordinary. Safe. When I returned to the house, I found a voice message from Deborah. Sophia, something interesting came up. APS advised me, off the record, that your report is not the first they have received regarding this situation. Someone filed an anonymous complaint approximately 9 weeks ago. They did not pursue it at that time because the complainant did not provide contact details, but the file exists. 9 weeks earlier, directly around the time when they had pressured Arthur to sign the October power of attorney, another person had seen what was occurring. Someone who had not possessed sufficient courage to identify themselves, but had cared enough to make the call. I did not know who, not at that moment. But the fact that the file already existed meant that APS would not be starting from nothing. The system operated more slowly than fury, but it was building. Day 4. My father arrived alone. He guided his 15-year-old sedan into the driveway, not the vehicle he drove to religious services or the tennis club, but the one he used for errands, the one nobody would notice. He remained behind the steering wheel for a long time before exiting. I watched from the kitchen window. His shoulders were curved. He appeared smaller than I remembered. He entered through the back door, the same entrance he had used to access this house since his childhood years. He did not acknowledge me initially. He just stood in the kitchen and surveyed the cabinets that his father had restored himself, the window above the sink where Arthur had hung a prism that scattered rainbows across the floor each sunrise. He used to sing in this kitchen, my father stated. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Old country songs, every Sunday dawn, I remember. He lowered himself onto a chair. He placed his palms flat on the oak surface, and I watched them tremble. I know what you think of me, he said. I remained silent. I never wanted this, any part of this. Michelle is in over her head. Patricia insists that the property is the only solution. He stopped. And Dad? His voice cracked, only slightly. A hairline split in a foundation. Dad would not want Michelle to lose everything. You could still stop this, Dad. He lifted his gaze to meet mine for one moment, one terrible, trembling moment. I saw the child who had been raised within this kitchen, who had eaten cake from these plates, who had been carried to sleep by the same gentleman now dozing in the adjacent room. Then his phone alerted. He glanced at the display. Patricia, I need to leave. He departed through the back entrance. He did not say goodbye to his father. I washed his coffee mug and put it away. Day 5. I purchased a dessert, not an elaborate one, a 7-inch round cake from the bakery on Chestnut Street. Vanilla with almond cream icing, because that was his preference. And a single candle, because 78 separate candles seemed like a fire hazard, and I wanted to generate a smile from him. I arranged it on the dining table at 5:00 in the evening. I set out 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 cloth napkins. I brewed tea. Grandpa, please come sit. He ambled in from the living area, spectacles resting on his forehead, a number puzzle folded inside his sweater pocket. He noticed the dessert and stopped. Whose celebration? Yours. We are redoing the occasion. He settled into a chair. I lit the candle. He examined the flame the way you examine something you are trying to secure in your memory, carefully, deliberately, as though if he stared intensely enough, the moment would stick. Make a wish, I instructed. He closed his eyes. He exhaled. The candle extinguished on the first attempt. What did you wish for? He looked at me with those clear spring water eyes. I wish that you would stay. We ate cake using utensils this time. He described the lilacs he had planted along the front path in 1988, the year I entered the world. He described how the dining table had originated from his mother's house in Bridgeport, carried in on the back of a borrowed pickup truck in 1974, and that each scratch on its surface represented a Christmas he had successfully hosted. Then he lowered his fork and angled toward me. Do not permit them to remove the table, he said. Quiet, fierce. I will not, Grandpa. The table remains here. I cleared the plates. I washed the dishes. I wrapped the leftover cake in wax paper and wrote Grandpa's birthday celebration's second attempt on it with a marker. 4 days remained until the closing. Day 6. The telephone calls began. My Aunt Caroline, my father's maternal aunt, called first. She was cautious, concerned. Sophia, my dear, your stepmother says you are attempting to seize control of Arthur's financial matters. She says you are, well, she used the term manipulative. I held the phone away from my ear and stared at the ceiling. Aunt Caroline, did Patricia mention that she and Michelle are trying to sell Grandpa's land while Grandpa has dementia? Silence. She described it as a family decision. It is a decision that Grandpa did not make. My stepmother's acquaintance from the book club called next, then Michelle's business associate, then a woman from the Horticultural Society who had known Arthur for 45 years. Each call carried the identical script, small variations on the same theme. Sophia is overstepping. Sophia is emotional. Sophia does not grasp the family's financial situation. Patricia had done what Patricia did best. She had shaped the story before I had an opportunity to speak. I did not fight back. I did not post on social media. I did not return any calls to argue my position. Deborah had told me, the documents speak. You do not have to. But on day 6, around 10:00 at night, my phone rang one final time. Aunt June, Arthur's younger sister, 83 years old, still sharp, still living in Bridgeport. Sophia. Her voice was dry and clear. I do not believe a single word Patricia is spreading, and I want you to understand why. Why? Because your grandfather telephoned me last year, September. He said he had visited an attorney. He said he was putting his affairs in order while he still could. He said, if anything happens, support Sophia. I gripped the phone tightly. I am supporting you, Aunt June said, whatever you require. 3 days remained until the closing. Day 7. Deborah and I confirmed the final details. United Title Group, January 30th, 3:00 in the afternoon. Conference room A. The escrow officer was a woman named Linda Foster, 25 years in the business. Deborah's contact said she was thorough and by the book. The buyer was Harborview Capital Partners, a regional cash acquisition firm that purchased undervalued residential properties, renovated or rented them, and moved on. Their representative was a man named Daniel Chen. He had been copied on the listing agreement and the purchase contract. Margaret Sullivan would be there as the listing agent. Patricia and Michelle would attend as sellers' representatives. Harrison would come because Patricia told him to. Deborah made one more call to the title company off the record and learned something that made her pause. Linda Foster had flagged the file 5 weeks ago. Deborah told me during the preliminary title search she noted that the property was held in a trust. She contacted Margaret Sullivan for clarification. Margaret sent over a signed affidavit claiming the trust had been dissolved and the property reconveyed to Arthur individually. Linda accepted it provisionally, but noted in her file that no recorded reconveyance deed had been found. The closing was scheduled as tentative, pending final title clearance. A clerical error, Margaret told her. The trust had been dissolved and the property returned to Arthur's individual name. That was not true, of course. The trust was never dissolved. The deed was still recorded. The deal was already standing on cracked ice. Linda Foster had a flag in the file. Margaret Sullivan had lied. The recorded trust deed was public record. All it needed was someone to put the original on the table. Here is the thing about paperwork that people underestimate. It does not raise its voice, and it does not forget. If you have ever been the quiet one that nobody took seriously, this next part is for you. Subscribe and stay with me until the closing table. 2 days left. Day 8, everything was in place. Deborah would attend the closing as Arthur's attorney of record, representing the trust. She would bring certified copies of the recorded trust deed, the durable power of attorney, and the physician's capacity evaluation. William Hayes would come as a notary witness. APS had assigned an investigator named Sandra Weeks. She would not be in the room. That was not how it worked. But she had confirmed the case was active and time-sensitive. Whatever happened at the closing would become part of her file. I spent the afternoon at the dining table reviewing the documents one more time. Trust deed. Power of attorney, capacity letter, the October power of attorney with the shaking signature, the listing agreement, the purchase contract, the discharge summary from Arthur's October hospital stay, everything lined up. Every date, every signature, every medical note pointed in the same direction. I practiced what I would say. Short sentences, no accusations, no emotion, just facts, delivered at the volume of a normal conversation. Deborah had coached me. You are not there to argue. You are not there to convince anyone. You are there to present documents that speak for themselves. Let the title officer do the rest. I was not the daughter they had ignored. I was not the paperwork pusher. I was the successor trustee of the Arthur J. Reynolds Revocable Living Trust, and I had every legal right to sit at that table. More than a right, an obligation. That evening, I ironed a blouse and set out my courtroom flats. The same flats I had worn the night I drove 5 hours to sing happy birthday to a gentleman sitting alone in his kitchen. Tomorrow, they would sit down to sign for a house that was not theirs. And I would be there when they found out, the night before the closing. I sat with Arthur in the living room. He was having a good hour, not a good day. Those were rare now, but a good hour. He was working on a number puzzle with his spectacles perched at the end of his nose, filling in the squares with a ballpoint pen. No pencil, because he said pencils were for people who did not trust themselves. Grandpa, tomorrow is going to be a big day. He did not look up. 7 across, legal instrument of protection, 5 letters. I smiled. Trust. He wrote it in, smart girl. I watched his hand. The pen moved slowly but with intention. The letters were small and careful. Not the smooth confidence of 15 months ago, but not the collapse of the October signature either. Somewhere in between, a man at the edge of the window, still reaching for the glass. He put the number puzzle down and looked at me. You are staying. I am staying. He reached into his sweater pocket and pulled out his spectacles case, the leather one with the brass clasp he had carried since I was a child. He opened it, removed a folded piece of paper, and handed it to me. It was a note written in his handwriting. Shaky but legible. Recent. For Sophia, the keeper of the table. Below it, his signature. Not the strong one from last year, not the broken one from October. A middle ground, trembling but intentional. Written by a man who knew he was fading and wanted to leave one more mark while he still could. "I am not finished yet," he said. I folded the note into my wallet. In the morning, the folder, the note, and I would go to the closing together. The closing, United Title Group occupied a single-story brick building on Market Street with tinted windows and a brass door handle polished to a mirror shine. I parked across the street at 2:45. Deborah pulled in beside me at 2:50. William was already inside. We walked in together. Deborah carried her briefcase. I carried the manila folder. Conference room A was small. 12 chairs around an oval table, a water pitcher, a printer humming in the corner. Linda Foster, the escrow officer, was arranging documents in neat stacks at the head of the table. She looked up when we entered, glanced at Deborah, and paused for half a second, the kind of pause that meant she recognized the name. "Ms. Marks, I did not see your firm listed on this transaction." "I represent the Arthur J. Reynolds Revocable Living Trust," Deborah said. "We have documents relevant to this closing." Linda Foster's pen stopped moving. Before she could respond, the door opened behind us. Patricia came in first. Cashmere blazer, church pearls. Her smile was already in position, bright, social, the hostess arriving at her own party. Michelle followed in a tailored blazer, her jaw set, a leather portfolio under her arm. Harrison trailed behind them, gray-faced, looking at the floor. Behind them came Margaret Sullivan, the realtor. Blonde highlights, kitten heels, a stack of closing documents fanned in her hand like a winning hand of cards. And last, Daniel Chen, the buyer's representative in a navy suit and a no-nonsense expression. Patricia saw me and stopped. "Sophia." She looked at Deborah, at the folder in my hands. Her smile did not change, but the muscles underneath it did. "What are you doing here?" "Taking a seat," I said. I sat down at the table. Deborah sat beside me. I placed the manila folder in front of me and I waited. The room was very quiet. The printer had stopped humming. Linda Foster looked at Deborah. "You said you have documents." "I do." Deborah opened her briefcase and laid 3 items on the table, one at a time, each centered and square, the way you would lay evidence before a judge. First, a certified copy of the recorded trust deed. This deed was recorded with the Fairmont Valley Town Clerk on September 18th of last year. It transfers the property at 22 Oakwood Lane into the Arthur J. Reynolds Revocable Living Trust. Ms. Reynolds, she nodded toward me, is the successor trustee. Patricia's smile fell, not all at once. In stages, like a building losing floors. Second, the durable power of attorney naming me as Arthur's agent. Executed on September 12th of last year, notarized, witnessed, currently in effect. Michelle leaned forward. We have a more recent power of attorney that supersedes this. Third, Deborah placed the physician's letter on the table. A capacity evaluation by Dr. Sherman, Arthur's neurologist, dated September 12th. It confirms that Arthur had full testamentary capacity when he signed these documents. I also have Dr. Sherman's current evaluation, completed last week, confirming that Arthur now lacks capacity. Meaning any documents he signed after his cognitive decline, including the October power of attorney your family obtained, were signed without the legal competence required to make them binding. The room went still. Linda Foster picked up the trust deed. She read it. She compared it to the title report in her file. She looked at Margaret Sullivan. "Ms. Sullivan, you informed me the trust had been dissolved." Margaret's face went white. "The trust was never dissolved," Deborah said. "The recorded deed confirms it. This property belongs to the trust. The sale cannot proceed." Linda Foster set the documents down, squared her shoulders, and spoke the 5 words that ended it. "I cannot close this transaction." She remembered everything. Daniel Chen closed his portfolio. Margaret stared at the table. Michelle gripped the armrests of her chair until her knuckles turned white. And Patricia looked at me like I had pulled the house out from under her feet. The silence lasted 5 seconds. Then Patricia broke it. This is absurd." Her voice climbed. She stood up, palms flat on the table, pearls swinging. Sophia is a legal clerk. She has no authority. My husband is Arthur's daughter, his only child, and she has a signed power of attorney that gives her full control. A power of attorney signed by a man who was hospitalized for confusion the same week, Deborah said, even and measured. A power of attorney with no capacity evaluation attached. A power of attorney that, even if valid, does not grant authority over assets held in a trust. You cannot do this. Michelle stood now too. Her voice was not Patricia's theatrical escalation. It was raw. I have a $780,000 payment due in 10 weeks. If this deal falls through, Ms. Reynolds, your financial obligations are not this office's concern, Linda Foster said. This is my grandfather's house. This is the trust's house, Deborah corrected. Administered by the trustee your grandfather appointed. That trustee is sitting at this table. Michelle turned on me. You are going to destroy this family. I looked at her. I kept my voice at exactly the volume I had practiced. Conversational, steady. You tried to sell a 78-year-old man's home while he sat alone on his birthday eating cake. Nobody came to help him. You had him sign documents during a hospital stay. You lied to the title company about a dissolved trust, and you are telling me that I am the one destroying this family? Michelle's mouth opened, then closed. Her fists were clenched at her sides. Patricia was crying now, loud, messy sobs. After everything I have done. Harrison sat motionless. He had not spoken since he had entered the room. He stared at the trust deed, at his father's signature, and I could see him doing the math. He had planned this. He had gone around his own daughter. He had looked at his only child and decided she was not enough. Daniel Chen stood. I think we are finished here. He nodded to Linda Foster and walked out. Margaret Sullivan was already gathering her things, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Deborah spoke into the quiet. For the record, an Adult Protective Services investigation into the financial exploitation of Arthur Reynolds is currently active. The October power of attorney will be formally challenged. Any further attempts to sell, encumber, or transfer trust property without the trustee's authorization will be treated as a legal matter. Patricia stopped crying. She stared at Deborah, then at me. The tears were still wet on her cheeks, but the expression underneath them was shifting from grief to something harder. You will regret this, she said. When Michelle loses her company, when your father has nowhere to turn, when this family falls apart, you will remember that you did this. I stood up. I picked up the manila folder and placed it in my bag. I looked at my stepmother, at the cashmere, the pearls, the tears she had learned to deploy like weather. You do not get to decide what he is worth, I said. Then I turned to Linda Foster. Thank you for your professionalism. Ms. Reynolds. Linda nodded. I will be documenting this closing as void and flagging the file. You will receive confirmation by email. I walked out of conference room. Deborah followed. William held the door. The January air hit my face, cold and clean, and I stood on the sidewalk for a full 15 seconds before I remembered to breathe. Deborah touched my elbow. You did well. I did what he asked me to do. That is what I mean. I drove back to Fairmont Valley with the folder on the passenger seat, exactly where the gas station bouquet had been 12 days ago. The house was still there. The lilacs were still along the front walk. The porch light was on. I went inside and found my grandfather asleep in his recliner, number puzzle in his lap, spectacles on. I knelt beside his chair and tucked the quilt around his shoulders. It is done, Grandpa, I said. The house is safe. He stirred. His hand found mine. The same thin grip, the same slender wrist. His eyes opened, cloudy at first, then clearing for just a moment. Sophia, I am here. Did you keep the table? I laughed. A real one, the kind that comes up from somewhere deep and surprises you. I kept the table. He smiled, small, certain. Good girl. He closed his eyes. Within a minute, he was asleep again, his breathing slow and even, the number puzzle rising and falling on his chest. I sat on the floor beside his recliner and looked at the kitchen through the doorway. At the oak table, scratched and tea-stained, still standing where it had stood since 1974. The folder was in my bag. The note was in my wallet. The house was in the trust. And for the first time in 12 days, the counting stopped. Here is what happened after. Michelle's balloon payment came due 10 weeks later, right on schedule. She missed it. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings on her development projects: 3 half-finished townhomes in Glastonbury and a commercial lot in Wethersfield. Michelle Reynolds Holdings filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in February. She sold the imported sports vehicle. Last I heard, she was working as a project manager for someone else's firm, making a third of what she had made before. She never called to apologize. Patricia's standing in Fairmont Valley fractured, not all at once. Reputations erode slowly in small towns, but the story leaked. People talk. Aunt June talked. Linda Foster documented everything in the closing file. The book club chat group, the one where Patricia had posted her Vermont selfie, went quiet around her. She stopped attending the Arts Council board. She and Harrison moved to a condo in West Hartford in the spring. My father emailed me once in March. 3 sentences. I should have done more, I know that now. I am sorry, I read it twice. I did not respond. Some apologies come too late to be anything but a record of what a person knows they should have said. APS substantiated the complaint. Over the following 4 months, through 2 probate hearings that no one in my family contested, the October power of attorney was formally voided. The court appointed me as Arthur's legal guardian and confirmed my role as permanent trustee of his trust. I deferred my bar exam. I took a leave of absence from the firm. I moved into the guest room at 22 Oakwood Lane, the one with the ceiling crack I had traced since I was 7. And I became the person who made sure Arthur Reynolds ate dinner, took his medication, and sat on the porch in the afternoons when the light came through the lilacs. It was not the career step I had planned. It was the right one. On a Tuesday in April, I baked a cake, vanilla with almond cream, nothing fancy. I set it on the dining table, the table from Bridgeport, the one that had survived 5 decades of Christmas dinners and 1 attempted theft. Arthur came in from the living room, number puzzle in hand. Whose birthday? No one's, it is Tuesday. We are having cake because it is Tuesday. He sat down, he picked up a fork, he took a bite and closed his eyes. This is my recipe, he said. It is. Good. He took another bite. Do not change it. We ate in the kitchen with the afternoon light striping through the window. The prism still hung above the sink, throwing small rainbows across the floor. The table held. A person's worth does not expire when their memory does. And the quietest love in a family is sometimes the only one keeping watch. That is my story. 1 empty party, 1 manila folder, and a grandfather who remembered first. If this reminded you to check on a loved one's directives, do it today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.